She was invisible to everyone, until the billionaire saw her crying and broke his own rules. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The coffee machine hummed its familiar tune, but no one heard Noelle Carter's quiet sigh as she watched it drip. The 42nd floor of Rhodes Financial buzzed with the energy of million-dollar decisions, power lunches, and conversations that could change lives. But for Noelle Carter, it was just another day of being overlooked. Another 8 hours of existing in the spaces between other people's importance. She stood at the coffee station, waiting for her cup to fill, when 3 executives brushed past her as if she were air. One of them, Bradley Westmont, Senior Vice President, actually stepped on her foot while reaching for sugar packets. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the casual dismissal she'd grown accustomed to over the past 2 years. "Excuse me," she whispered to no one. Noelle tucked a strand of her natural hair behind her ear and returned to her desk in the administrative pool. The grey cubicle walls felt smaller today, the fluorescent lights harsher. She opened her laptop and stared at the endless stream of emails, meeting requests and expense reports that would consume her day. Denied, read the subject line of an email she'd been dreading. The financial aid office at Georgetown University. Her application for re-enrollment had been rejected again. Not enough funds, not enough options. She closed the email quickly before the familiar tightness could spread across her chest. "Noelle!" Mrs. Henderson's sharp voice cut through the cubicle maze. "I need the Morrison files copied and bound for the 3 o'clock meeting. 20 copies." "Yes, ma'am." Noelle's voice carried the practiced steadiness of someone who'd learned that invisible people don't get to show frustration. As she gathered the thick Morrison portfolio, her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Zara. Power got shut off again. Using neighbor's Wi-Fi. "Can you?" Noelle didn't need to read the rest. The electric bill. The one she'd been stretching for 2 weeks, choosing between keeping the lights on at home or buying lunch at work. She'd chosen lights. Her stomach had been choosing crackers from the office kitchen. She made her way to the copy room, a windowless space that smelled of toner and broken dreams. The ancient machine groaned to life, and she fed it page after page, watching the green light scan back and forth like a heartbeat monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound matched the rhythm of her anxiety. 20 copies of other people's success stories, 20 copies of deals she'd never be part of, 20 copies of a world that existed just beyond her reach. The machine jammed on page 47. "No, no, no," she whispered, lifting the heavy cover and carefully extracting the crumpled paper. Black toner stained her fingers, her white blouse, the sleeve of her cardigan, the only professional cardigan she owned. She glanced at the clock. 2:47 p.m. 13 minutes to fix the jam, finish the copies and deliver them to the conference room. Her hands trembled as she tried to clear the paper path. The tightness in her chest was spreading now, creeping up her throat like fog. Her breathing grew shallow. Not here, she told herself. Not now. But anxiety doesn't follow schedules or respect professional settings. It comes when it wants, takes what it needs, and leaves you smaller than before. The copy room door opened. "Noelle, where are those—" "Oh." Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted from impatience to mild disgust as she took in the scene. The jammed machine, the toner stains, Noelle's strained breathing. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to—" "Forget it. I'll get someone else to handle this." Mrs. Henderson's heels clicked against the tile floor as she left. "Next time, check the machine before you start." The door closed with a soft thud that felt like thunder. Noelle stood alone in the copy room, surrounded by the smell of defeat and the steady hum of fluorescent lights. She pressed her back against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the cold floor, her work skirt spreading around her like a deflated parachute. The tears came quietly as they always did. No sobs, no dramatic breakdown, just the silent overflow of a cup that had been filled too full for too long. She pulled out her phone and typed a text to Zara. "I'll transfer money tonight, don't worry." The lie came easily. She'd gotten good at protecting people from her reality. By 6:30 p.m. the office had emptied. The executives had gone home to their suburban mansions and weekend plans. The support staff had rushed to second jobs or daycare pickups, but Noelle remained, using the quiet hours to organize files, clean up the copy room disaster, and prepare for tomorrow's meetings she wouldn't attend. Her stomach growled as she finally gathered her things. The parking garage was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Her own car, a 10-year-old Honda with a scratch down the passenger side and a temperamental starter, sat in the far corner where monthly parking was cheapest. She walked slowly across the concrete, her heels echoing in the cavernous space. The sound felt too loud, too present, as if even here in this empty place, she was taking up too much space. Noelle reached her car and fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before managing to unlock the door. She slid into the driver's seat and just sat there, surrounded by the familiar scent of vanilla air freshener and worn upholstery. The day pressed down on her like a weighted blanket, the rejection letter, the power bill, the stained blouse she couldn't afford to replace, the way Mrs. Henderson had looked at her like she was an inconvenience rather than a person, and underneath it all, the constant ache of dreams deferred, of a life lived in the margins of other people's stories. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel and let the tears come freely now in the safety of her solitude. Tomorrow, she told herself, tomorrow I'll be stronger. But tonight, in the fluorescent-lit emptiness of the parking garage, Noelle Carter allowed herself to feel the full weight of being invisible. What she didn't know was that 37 floors above, someone was working late. Someone who never worked late. Someone whose entire world was about to change because of a woman crying alone in a parking garage, believing she was completely unseen. Have you ever felt completely invisible in your work or life, as if no one really saw you for who you are on the inside? Tell us in the comments. What was the moment when you felt most ignored, and what gave you the strength to carry on? Some rules are meant to be broken, but Killian Rhodes had never broken any of his. The elevator descended through 47 floors of absolute silence. Killian Rhodes stood motionless, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed, his titanium watch catching the dim light as numbers counted down on the digital display. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, far later than he usually stayed, but the Yamamoto merger required his personal attention, and perfection couldn't be rushed. That's how he'd built Rhodes Financial from a struggling startup into a billion-dollar empire. Control, precision, distance. The elevator reached P2, and the doors slid open with a whisper. Killian stepped into the parking garage, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the concrete in measured steps. His black Aston Martin waited in its reserved spot, as pristine and untouchable as everything else in his carefully orchestrated life. He was halfway across the garage when he heard it, a sound so soft, so broken, it almost didn't register. Almost. Crying. Killian stopped, his hand frozen on his car keys, his entire body alert in a way that felt foreign. In 37 years of life, he'd mastered the art of not getting involved. Personal problems were distractions. Other people's pain was not his concern. The sound came again, quieter now, as if someone was trying to muffle their own despair. Against every instinct, every rule he'd built his life around, Killian turned toward the sound. In the far corner of the garage, barely visible under the flickering fluorescent light, sat a small Honda Civic. Through the driver's side window, he could make out a figure hunched over the steering wheel, shoulders shaking with the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying too much for too long. Walk away, his rational mind commanded. This is not your problem. But his feet moved forward. As he drew closer, recognition hit him like cold water. The woman in the car wasn't a stranger. He'd seen her before, many times actually. In the elevator, clutching files to her chest, eyes always downcast. At the coffee station, waiting patiently while others pushed past her. In the administrative pool, a quiet presence that somehow registered in his peripheral vision, despite her efforts to remain invisible. Noelle something. Carter, maybe. She was crying with the practiced silence of someone who'd learned that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in public spaces. Her hands covered her face, and even from this distance Killian could see the defeat in the curve of her spine. He should leave. This was exactly the kind of emotional complication he'd spent years avoiding. Personal involvement led to weakness. Weakness led to mistakes. Mistakes led to loss. But something about her stillness, her complete surrender to grief in what she believed was solitude, cracked something inside him he thought was permanently sealed. Before he could stop himself, Killian was walking toward her car. He knocked softly on the passenger window. Noelle's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock and mortification. Even in the dim light, he could see her frantically wiping at her face, trying to erase evidence of her vulnerability. She fumbled with the keys, clearly trying to start the car and escape. The engine made a grinding sound and died. She tried again. Same result. Killian gestured for her to roll down the window. After a moment of obvious internal debate, she complied, opening it just enough to speak. "Mr. Rhodes." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I'm sorry, I was just leaving. I didn't realize anyone was still. Your car won't start." It wasn't a question. Killian had heard that particular death rattle before. Starter motor, probably shot. "It's fine. It just needs a minute to—" She turned the key again. The grinding sound was even worse this time. "When did you last have it serviced?" The question seemed to surprise her. It's been a while. I've been meaning to—" "May I?" He gestured toward the hood. Noelle stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "You want to look at my car? I restored a '67 Mustang in college." Old habits. It was true, though he couldn't remember the last time he'd mentioned that particular detail of his past. The billionaire CEO of Rhodes Financial didn't typically discuss his mechanical knowledge. She hesitated, then pressed the hood release. Killian removed his jacket, folding it carefully and placing it on the roof of her car. He rolled up his sleeves and lifted the hood, immediately spotting the corroded battery terminals and frayed starter connections. "When did you eat last?" The question came out of nowhere, surprising them both. "I'm sorry?" "Food. When was your last meal?" Noelle's silence was answer enough. Killian straightened, studying her face in the harsh garage lighting. He noticed things he'd never allowed himself to see before, the way her clothes hung slightly loose, suggesting recent weight loss, the careful way she held herself, as if conserving energy, the practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There's a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from here. Delilah's." "I know it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Your car needs a new starter motor and battery terminals. It's not driving anywhere tonight. I can call—" "I'll drive you." The offer hung between them like a bridge neither had planned to build. "Mr. Rhodes, I couldn't possibly—" "It's late. The buses stopped running. And you haven't eaten." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my mechanic. Lucien works nights. He'll tow your car and have it fixed by morning. I can't afford—" "Company car." The lie came smoothly. "Insurance covers everything." Noelle looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Suspicion mixed with desperate hope, wariness battling with bone-deep exhaustion. "Why are you helping me?" It was a fair question, one he wasn't sure he could answer honestly. "Because," he said, surprising himself with the truth, "someone should." He made the call to Lucien, then gathered his jacket and waited while she collected her purse and locked her car. As they walked toward his Aston Martin, Killian found himself adjusting his pace to match hers, something he'd never done for anyone. "I've never been in a car like this," Noelle admitted as he held the passenger door open. "It's just a car." But as she settled into the leather seat, carefully smoothing her skirt and placing her hands in her lap like she was afraid to touch anything, Killian realized it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of everything that separated their worlds. The engine purred to life, and they drove through the empty streets in comfortable silence. At a red light, Killian glanced over at her. She was staring out the window, but her reflection in the glass showed a face that was gradually relaxing, as if she was allowing herself to believe, for just this moment, that someone had seen her. "Miss Carter." She turned to him, surprised he knew her name. "This stays between us." She nodded slowly. "Of course." But as they pulled into Delilah's parking lot, Killian wondered if he was talking about the car trouble, or the fact that for the first time in his adult life, he'd broken his most important rule. He'd gotten involved. Sometimes the most profound conversations happen over coffee at midnight with a stranger who isn't really a stranger at all. Delilah's diner looked exactly like every all-night refuge should. Red vinyl booths with small tiers mended by duct tape, fluorescent lighting that hummed slightly off-key, and the comforting smell of coffee that had been brewing since the Carter administration. A bell chimed as Killian held the door open for Noelle, and she stepped into the warmth like someone emerging from a long, cold swim. The night waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and sensible shoes, looked up from wiping down the counter. Her gaze moved from Killian's expensive suit to Noelle's work clothes, taking in the unlikely pairing without judgment. "Booth or counter, hun?" she asked, directing the question to Noelle rather than the man who clearly had more money. "Booth, please," Noelle replied softly. They settled into a corner booth, the red vinyl creaking under their weight. Killian found himself sitting across from an employee for the first time in years, not in a conference room, not in his office, but in a place where titles didn't matter, and everyone was just trying to make it through the night. The waitress approached with 2 coffee cups and a pot that had seen better decades. "What can I get you folks?" Killian looked at Noelle, who was studying the laminated menu with the concentration of someone calculating every dollar. "The pancakes here are good," he said quietly. "And the soup." "I'm not really hungry," she began. "2 orders of pancakes," Killian told the waitress. "And the chicken soup, extra bread." When the waitress walked away, Noelle looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "You don't have to—" "When did you become invisible?" The question stopped her mid-sentence. She wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, as if anchoring herself. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Killian's voice was gentle but insistent. "I've seen you at the office for 2 years. You move through that building like you're trying not to disturb the air around you." Noelle was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "It's easier that way. When you don't expect to be seen, you can't be disappointed when you're not." "Who taught you that?" She looked up, startled by the question. "What? Invisibility isn't natural. Someone taught you that taking up space was wrong." The soup and pancakes arrived, providing a momentary distraction. Noelle stared at the plate in front of her, as if it might disappear. "Eat," Killian said simply. She took a small bite, then another. He watched as her body gradually relaxed, as if proper nutrition was reminding her cells how to function. "My mother used to say that good girls don't make noise," she said finally. "Don't ask for things. Don't complain. Don't draw attention." She cut another piece of pancake, smaller than necessary. "I got really good at being what she wanted. And now? Now she's been gone for 3 years and I'm still following rules that don't serve me anymore." Noelle's laugh held no humor. "Pathetic, right?" "No," Killian said with surprising firmness. "Learned behavior isn't pathetic, it's survival." She looked at him with curiosity. "You sound like you know something about that." Killian found himself on unfamiliar ground. He didn't talk about his past, ever. But something about the fluorescent-lit honesty of this place, about the way she'd shared her truth so simply, made his usual defenses feel unnecessary. "My father believed emotions were weakness. Caring about people made you vulnerable. Success required isolation." He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I learned those lessons very well. And now? Now I run a company built on those principles, and I haven't had a real conversation with another human being in—" He paused, calculating. "Years. What about tonight? Tonight doesn't count." "Why not?" The question hung between them. Killian realized he didn't have a good answer, which was disturbing for a man who had spent decades preparing responses to every possible scenario. "Tell me about psychology," he said, deflecting. Noelle's face lit up in a way he'd never seen at the office. "You know about that? I know you were in school. I know you had to stop. Financial aid ran out. My mom got sick and—" She shrugged, but the gesture couldn't hide the pain. "Sometimes life has other plans. What drew you to it? People fascinate me." She took another bite, more confident now. "The way we adapt, survive, protect ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are and why we matter." "And what story do you tell yourself?" "That I'm temporary everywhere I go." The words came out without hesitation, as if she'd been carrying them for years. "That I'm lucky to be tolerated, grateful for scraps, always one mistake away from being asked to leave." Killian felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that was uncomfortable in its intensity. "I tell myself I don't need anyone," he admitted. "That needing people is dangerous, that I'm safer alone." "Are you?" "I thought I was." He looked across the table at her, this woman who'd been invisible to him for 2 years, despite working 30 feet from his elevator. "Now, I'm not sure." They sat in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. The diner was nearly empty, except for a trucker reading a paperback novel and a young couple sharing a piece of pie. "Why did you stop tonight?" Noelle asked. "In the garage. You could have just driven away." Killian considered the question seriously. "I don't know. I've never done anything like that before." "Never? Never?" He met her eyes. "I have rules, Ms. Carter. Very strict rules about professional boundaries, personal involvement, emotional entanglements. And tonight? Tonight I seem to be breaking all of them." The waitress refilled their coffee cups, and Noelle wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic again. "Are you worried about that?" she asked. "Breaking your rules?" "I should be. But you're not?" Killian realized with some surprise that he wasn't. For a man whose life was built on predictability and control, the uncertainty should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first genuine breath he'd taken in years. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not." Outside, the city continued its restless sleep, unaware that in a fluorescent-lit diner, Two people were discovering that sometimes the most important conversations happen when you least expect them. As Noelle finished her soup and Killian found himself ordering a second cup of coffee, something he never did, neither of them realized they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. But perhaps that was exactly what they both needed. A point of no return in lives that had been standing perfectly still for far too long. Nothing changes everything quite like the harsh light of morning after a night that wasn't supposed to happen. Noelle stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6:47 a.m., staring at a reflection that looked different somehow. Same brown eyes, same natural hair pulled back into a practical bun, same understated makeup, but there was something in her expression, a softness around the edges, as if she'd forgotten to put her armor back on. Last night felt like a dream. The broken-down car, the unexpected rescue, the fluorescent-lit honesty of Delilah's diner. Most surreal of all, 3 hours of conversation with Killian Rhodes, the man whose very presence in the elevator made seasoned executives straighten their ties and check their phones nervously. She'd told him things she'd never said aloud, about her mother's impossible standards, about feeling temporary in her own life, about dreams deferred and bills that seemed to multiply in the dark, and he'd listened, really listened. Not the way people do when they're waiting for their turn to speak, but with the kind of attention that made her words feel important. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your car is in the lobby parking garage, level 1, spot 23. The keys are with security." K.R. Noelle stared at the message, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He'd really called his mechanic. At midnight, for her. She grabbed her purse and rushed downstairs to the lobby of her modest apartment building. Through the glass doors, she could see her Honda sitting in the visitor parking area, looking somehow more dignified than usual. At the security desk, the guard handed her the keys with a knowing smile. "Must be nice to have friends in high places," he said with a wink. Noelle didn't know how to respond to that. The car started immediately. No grinding, no hesitation. Just the smooth hum of an engine that had been properly cared for. A note was tucked under the windshield wiper. Starter replaced. Battery terminals cleaned. Oil changed. No charge. L. Morrison. Morrison's Auto. No charge. Of course not, because Killian Rhodes had made a phone call, and when billionaires make phone calls at midnight, mechanics don't ask questions about payment. The drive to work felt different. 37 floors up, she knew he was probably already at his desk, reviewing reports and making decisions that affected thousands of lives, back to being the untouchable CEO who lived in a world she could only glimpse from the outside. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the familiar buzz of corporate efficiency greeted her like a slap of cold air. She walked to her cubicle with practiced invisibility, but something was off. People were looking at her, not obviously, just quick glances, barely perceptible head turns, the kind of attention that made her skin prickle with unease. "Noelle," Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the administrative pool like a church bell. "Conference room B now." Her stomach dropped. This was it. Someone had seen her with Killian last night. Someone had reported it. She was about to lose the job she desperately needed, for reasons she couldn't even explain. Conference room B was small and windowless, with a table that had seen better decades and chairs that squeaked when you moved. Mrs. Henderson sat across from her with a manila folder and an expression that revealed nothing. "You've been with us for 2 years," Mrs. Henderson began. "Yes, ma'am. Your work has been adequate." Adequate. The word stung more than it should have. "However," Mrs. Henderson continued, "there's been an unusual request." She opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. "Internal transfer, effective immediately." Noelle stared at the document. Her name, her employee number, and a department she'd never heard of, strategic analysis and special projects, reporting directly to... Her breath caught. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Neither do I." Mrs. Henderson's tone suggested she found the entire situation personally offensive, but the request came from the top floor, executive level. "The 47th floor, Killian's floor. What kind of work is it? Confidential projects, research, analysis." Mrs. Henderson's voice carried the weight of someone delivering news she didn't approve of. "Your new supervisor will brief you. Pack your things. They're expecting you upstairs in an hour." Noelle walked back to her cubicle in a daze. Her co-workers watched with barely concealed curiosity as she gathered her few personal items: a small succulent plant, a framed photo of her and her sister, a coffee mug that said, "World's most patient person," A gag gift from Zara that felt prophetic now. Everything fit in a single cardboard box. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt like ascending to another planet. She'd never been this high in the building before. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of marble floors, original artwork and windows that offered a view of the entire city. A woman in her 30s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes approached her. "Ms. Carter, I'm Vivian Montgomery, executive assistant to Mr. Rhodes. Follow me, please." They walked down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Noelle caught glimpses of conference rooms filled with important-looking people making important-looking decisions. Everything here moved with the quiet efficiency of serious money. "Mr. Rhodes is in meetings until 3, Vivian explained as they stopped in front of a door marked Strategic Analysis. "Your office is here. Everything you need to get started is on your desk." Office. Not cubicle. Office. The space was small but immaculate, with a window that looked out over the financial district. On the desk sat a new laptop, a stack of folders marked Confidential, and a single yellow sticky note. Noelle waited until Vivian left before reading it. "Some rules are worth breaking, Kr." She sank into the leather chair, her chair, and tried to process what was happening. Yesterday, she was invisible. Today she had an office on the executive floor and a direct line to the most powerful man in the building. Last night hadn't been a dream. It had been the beginning of something she didn't understand and wasn't sure she was brave enough to explore. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the same unknown number. "Welcome to the 47th floor. We need to talk." Noelle stared at the message, her heart racing. Everything in her life that had been predictable and safe was shifting beneath her feet. She was terrified. She was also, for the first time in years, completely awake. But as she looked around her new office, one question burned brighter than all the others. What exactly did Killian Rhodes want from her, and was she prepared to find out? The most dangerous conversations always begin with, "We need to talk." At exactly 3:07 p.m., Noelle's office phone rang, not the general office line, but a direct call that bypassed Vivian's screening entirely. "Ms. Carter." Killian's voice was different over the phone, more formal, carefully controlled. "My office, 5 minutes." The line went dead before she could respond. Noelle stared at the phone, her palms suddenly damp. She'd spent the day trying to make sense of the confidential files on her desk, market analysis reports, psychological profiles of potential merger targets, consumer behavior studies that seemed oddly specific and personal. Nothing that required her particular skill set, nothing that explained why she was here. She smoothed her skirt, checked her reflection in the dark computer screen, and walked down the hallway toward the corner office she'd only seen from a distance. Killian's office was everything she'd expected, and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was sleek and expensive, all clean lines and understated luxury. But what surprised her were the personal touches. A vintage chess set on a side table, a single photograph of an older man she didn't recognize, and shelves lined with books that showed actual wear from being read. Killian stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he stared out at the afternoon skyline. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his white dress shirt was rolled up at the sleeves. Something about the casual gesture made him seem less untouchable, more human. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Noelle hesitated, then complied. The soft click of the latch felt significant, like a boundary being crossed. "This morning you received a car that works, a new office, and a job description that makes no sense." He turned to face her. "You must have questions." "Several," she admitted. "Ask them. Why am I here? Because you see things other people miss." "That's not an answer." "Isn't it?" Killian moved to his desk, but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against it, arms crossed. "Yesterday, Mrs. Henderson treated you like furniture. Your co-workers walk past you as if you don't exist. But in 3 hours at a diner, you read me better than a team of corporate psychologists I pay 6 figures annually." Noelle felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't understand what you're getting at. Last night, you told me that people fascinate you, that you study how they adapt, survive, protect themselves. That's exactly what I need." "For what?" Killian was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm considering a major acquisition, a family-owned company in Portland, 3rd generation, deeply rooted in their community, fiercely protective of their employees and values. And every consultant I've hired tells me the same thing. Offer enough money and they'll sell. but I don't think they're right. He pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. I think there's something they're missing. Something about people that spreadsheets can't capture. Noelle took the folder, her fingers brushing against his briefly. Even that small contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. You want me to analyze them? I want you to understand them, the way you understood me last night. The implication hung between them like a challenge. Noelle opened the folder and saw photographs, newspaper clippings, financial records, and what looked like surveillance reports on a company called Riverside Textiles. This feels invasive, she said quietly. It's business. Is it? She looked up at him. Or is this about last night? About proving that you can compartmentalize what happened? Put it in a box labeled useful so it feels safer. Killian's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. That's not, isn't it? Noelle closed the folder. You said yourself that you've never done anything like last night before, never broken your rules. So now you're trying to make it make sense by turning it into work. You're here because you're qualified for the position. What position? Reading people for corporate espionage? Strategic analysis of human behavior patterns in high-stakes negotiations. That's a very fancy way of saying the same thing. They stared at each other across the expensive office, and Noelle realized they were having two conversations at once, one about business and one about the careful distance Killian was trying to rebuild between them. Last night, she said carefully, you told me that needing people was dangerous, that you were safer alone. That hasn't changed. Then why am I here? Because, Killian ran a hand through his dark hair, disturbing its perfect styling. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said, about being temporary everywhere you go, about taking up space being wrong. And I recognize it. His voice was quieter now, less controlled. The way you move through the world like you're apologizing for existing. I do the same thing, just from the opposite direction. What do you mean? I take up all the space in every room I enter. I dominate conversations, control outcomes, demand attention. But it's the same survival mechanism, isn't it? Different expression, same fear. Noelle felt something shift in her chest. What are we afraid of? Being seen for who we really are and found wanting. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the CEO speaking, or the billionaire, or the man who could buy and sell companies on a whim. This was just Killian, standing in his office at the end of a long day, admitting to fears that made him human. So, what happens now? She asked. Now you decide if you want this job. Real job, not a favor. The analysis work is legitimate and you're genuinely qualified for it, but you should know. Know what? That working this closely with me might be complicated. Complicated how? Killian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I've spent 15 years building walls, and somehow you found a door I didn't know existed. The admission hung between them like a confession. Noelle clutched the folder to her chest, her heart racing. Mr. Rhodes, Killian, if we're going to work together, if we're going to... He paused, seeming to realize he was on dangerous ground. Just Killian. Killian, she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It felt intimate in a way that made her nervous. I need to ask you something. What? Are you offering me this job because you think I can help you with this acquisition, or because you're trying to keep me close enough to figure out what happened between us last night? Killian met her eyes directly. I don't know. It was the most honest answer he could have given, and somehow the most terrifying. I need time to think, Noelle said. Of course, take the weekend. Decide Monday. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Killian? Yes? That door you mentioned? It opens from both sides. And with that she left him standing in his perfect office, staring at a door that had just become the most important thing in his carefully controlled world. Sometimes the most important decisions are made in grocery store aisles at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Noelle pushed her cart through the fluorescent-lit aisles of Save Mart, the same grocery store she'd shopped at for 2 years. But today, everything felt different. The Riverside Textiles folder sat in her purse like a weight, and Killian's words echoed in her mind. You found a door I didn't know existed. She paused in the cereal aisle, staring at boxes of generic brand cornflakes, her usual choice. But her hand reached for something else, the name brand kind she'd always wanted but never justified the expense. A small rebellion, but it felt significant. Her phone buzzed. Zara's name appeared on the screen. Please tell me you didn't get fired yesterday. Her sister's voice was breathless with worry. You texted that weird message about your car being fixed, and then nothing. I've been freaking out. I didn't get fired. Noelle maneuvered her cart around an elderly man examining soup cans. I got promoted, I think. You think? It's complicated. Complicated how? Did you sleep with your boss? Zara. Noelle's voice was sharper than intended. Several shoppers turned to look. I'm kidding, geez, but seriously, what happened? Noelle found herself in the produce section, absently selecting apples while trying to explain the unexplainable. Remember that guy I mentioned? The CEO who's never spoken to anyone below executive level? The Ice King billionaire? He's not... Noelle stopped herself. Yes, him. He offered me a new position, research analyst, my own office. That's amazing. Why do you sound like someone died? Because someone had died, in a way. The version of herself who accepted invisibility, who expected nothing, who asked for less. That woman was fading, and Noelle wasn't sure who was replacing her. I think he likes me, she whispered. Likes you how? I don't know. That's the problem. She told Zara about the car trouble, the diner, the unexpected conversation that had lasted until nearly 3 a.m., about feeling seen for the first time in years, about the way Killian had looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her as if she mattered. And this scares you because men like him don't notice women like me. Not really. Not in ways that last. Noelle picked up a pineapple, put it down, picked it up again. I'm probably just a novelty, something different from his usual type. What's his usual type? I don't know. Models? Socialites? Women who don't buy generic cereal and wear the same 3 work outfits in rotation. Noelle Marie Carter. Zara's voice took on the tone she'd used when they were kids, and she was about to deliver hard truths. You're doing that thing again. What thing? The thing where you decide you're not good enough before anyone else gets the chance to disagree. Noelle pushed her cart toward the checkout, past displays of weekend barbecue supplies and summer magazines, featuring women who looked nothing like her. It's not that simple, isn't it? A powerful, intelligent man sees something in you that you've been hiding from the world. Instead of being excited, you're terrified. Why? Because what if I'm wrong? What if I let myself believe this is real and then what? You end up exactly where you are now, invisible and accepting it. The words hit harder than Noelle expected. She stopped walking, causing her cart to bump into a display of energy drinks. I can't afford to be wrong about this, see? I need this job. I need the money. And you think mixing business with personal feelings will ruin that? I think men like Killian Rhodes have options I can't compete with. Maybe. Or maybe he's just as scared as you are. The idea was so foreign that Noelle almost laughed. Scared of what? Of wanting something real instead of something safe. After the call ended, Noelle sat in her car in the Save Mart parking lot, staring at the folder that had become the center of her weekend anxiety. She opened it for the 3rd time, studying the photographs of Riverside Textiles. It was a beautiful company. Family photos showed 3 generations working side by side. Newspaper clippings highlighted their community involvement, their employee loyalty programs, their refusal to outsource jobs overseas despite financial pressure. This wasn't just a business, it was a legacy, a life's work, a small-town institution, and Killian wanted her to find its weak spots. Her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but somehow knew belonged to him. Hello? I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend. Killian's voice sounded different, less controlled, almost hesitant. I was wondering, have you had a chance to look at the folder? I have. And? Noelle took a deep breath. They're not going to sell. Silence on the other end. Then, what makes you say that? Because it's not about money for them. Look at the photos. 3 generations working together. The grandfather still comes to work every day at 82. The current CEO's daughter just joined as an intern. They're not building a business. They're building a dynasty. Every dynasty has a price. Does it? Noelle surprised herself with the challenge in her voice. What's yours? Another pause. I don't understand. What would someone have to offer you to make you sell Rhodes Financial? Not just money. What would it take? That's different. Is it? She could hear him breathing, could almost see him standing in whatever expensive space he called home, processing the question no one had probably ever asked him. Why are you really calling? She asked gently. He stopped, started again. I keep thinking about what you said, about the door opening from both sides. And I've never opened a door I couldn't control what was on the other side of. The vulnerability in his admission made her chest tight. Killian, I know this is inappropriate. Calling you, thinking about this, whatever this is. What do you want it to be? The question hung between them across phone lines and city blocks, across the vast distance between their different worlds. "I want to see you again," he said finally. "Not as your boss, not in my office, just see you." Noelle's heart raced. That's probably not a good idea. Probably not. It could complicate everything. It already has. She closed her eyes, sitting in her economy car in a discount grocery store parking lot, talking to a billionaire who sounded as lost as she felt. "There's a farmer's market tomorrow morning," she heard herself say. "Downtown, corner of 5th and Main. I go there sometimes." "What time?" 10 o'clock, by the coffee stand." "Noelle?" "Yes." "Thank you." After he hung up, she sat in the quiet car surrounded by grocery bags and the weight of a decision that felt too big for her small life. But maybe, she thought as she finally started the engine, it was time for a bigger life. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, she would allow herself to hope. The most honest version of yourself emerges on Sunday mornings when the world is quiet and pretenses fall away. At 9:47 a.m., Noelle stood in front of her closet wearing nothing but uncertainty and a towel. Every outfit felt like a statement she wasn't sure she wanted to make. Too casual and she'd look like she didn't care. Too dressed up and she'd seem desperate. Too professional and she'd remind them both of the impossible line they were crossing. She finally settled on a soft blue sundress she'd bought 2 years ago, but never worn. Too pretty for work, too nice for her usual weekend errands. But today felt like a day for clothes that had been waiting for the right moment. The farmer's market buzzed with Sunday morning energy. Families wandered between stalls, selling organic vegetables and homemade honey. Couples shared coffee and fresh pastries. Children chased each other around displays of sunflowers and summer squash. It was the kind of scene Noelle usually observed from the edges, but today she walked through it with purpose. She found the coffee stand at exactly 10:02 and ordered a lavender latte, another small rebellion against her usual black coffee. As she waited, she scanned the crowd, wondering if Killian would actually show up, wondering if she wanted him to. "You came." She turned to find him standing 3 feet away, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. This wasn't the CEO in his armor of expensive suits and calculated control. This was Killian in dark jeans and a grey cotton sweater, his hair slightly messed by the morning breeze, looking almost normal. Almost. "You sound surprised," she said, accepting her latte from the barista. "I thought you might change your mind." He ordered his own coffee, black, she noticed, and they stood there for a moment, two people who had crossed an invisible line and weren't sure how to navigate the new territory. "I almost did." "What changed your mind?" Noelle looked around at the families, the couples, the easy Sunday morning intimacy of people who belonged in each other's lives. "I realized I was tired of watching other people live." They walked slowly through the market, past stalls selling handmade jewelry and local art. Killian moved differently here, less commanding, more observant, as if he was seeing the world through new eyes. "You come here often?" he asked, stopping at a booth displaying heirloom tomatoes. "Every few weeks. It feels real, you know, like the opposite of the corporate world." "Real how?" "People growing things, making things with their hands, building something that matters to them, not just to shareholders." She picked up a tomato, inhaling its earthy scent. "Like that family in your folder, Riverside Textiles." Killian's expression shifted slightly. "You really think they won't sell? I think you're asking the wrong question." "What should I be asking?" "Why do you want to buy them?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. They moved to a bench near the flower vendors, sitting close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with morning air. "Because they have something I don't understand," he said finally. "Which is loyalty, purpose, something beyond profit." He watched a young father lift his daughter to smell a bouquet of roses. "My father built Rhodes Financial to be untouchable. Efficient, successful, but he never built it to be loved." "And you want to learn how?" "I want to understand what I've been missing." Noelle studied his profile as he watched the families around them. "What were you missing?" "Connection, I think. The feeling that what you do matters to people, not just balance sheets. You could create that at Rhodes Financial. You don't need to buy it from someone else." "Could I?" He turned to look at her directly. "How do you teach a company to care when you're still learning how to care yourself?" The question hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Noelle felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of the deeper truth beneath their professional conversation. "Is that what this is about?" she asked softly. "Learning how to care, maybe." His voice was barely audible over the market sounds. "You make it look so easy." "What?" "Caring, connecting, reading people like stories instead of obstacles." They sat in comfortable silence, watching vendors arrange their displays and customers meander through the stalls. A little girl dropped her ice cream and burst into tears until her mother scooped her up and kissed the hurt away. Simple human kindness, offered without calculation. Killian? Yes? What happens Monday morning? The question they'd both been avoiding. When the farmer's market magic wore off and they returned to the 47th floor, to the impossible dynamics of boss and employee, billionaire and struggling woman trying to rebuild her life. I don't know, he admitted. I've never been in this situation before. What situation? Wanting something I can't buy. The honesty in his voice made her stomach flutter. You think you can't have me. I think I don't know how to have you without destroying what we're building. And what are we building? He turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Uncertainty mixed with hope, fear braided with longing. Something I don't have a name for yet. A vendor called out about fresh strawberries, breaking the intensity of the moment, but the words hung between them like a promise neither was ready to make. They walked through the rest of the market slowly, sharing a bag of kettle corn and comfortable conversation about everything except the elephant following them through the stalls. He bought her a small succulent, "For your new office," he said, with a smile that made her forget to breathe. She showed him how to pick the best peaches, their fingers brushing as they examined the fruit. It felt like dating. It felt like friendship. It felt like the beginning of something that could either save them both or destroy everything they'd worked to build. As they reached the edge of the market, Noelle knew this was the moment that would define everything that came next. I should go, she said, though her feet seemed rooted to the sidewalk. Should you? Monday morning. Is tomorrow. This is today. Killian, I know. I know this is complicated. I know there are rules and protocols and proper procedures for everything in my world. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. But I don't want to follow rules anymore. Not about this. What do you want? I want to spend today pretending we're just two people who met at a diner and discovered they like talking to each other. The proposal was so simple and so impossible that it took her breath away. Just today. Just today. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest. Noelle looked into his eyes and saw the same fear and hope she felt in her own chest. The same desperate wish for something real in a world built on artificial foundations. Okay, she whispered, just today. But they both knew that some days change everything that comes after. Sometimes forever begins with a single, perfect afternoon when two people forget who they're supposed to be. The park stretched out before them like an invitation, all green grass and scattered oak trees, and the kind of Sunday afternoon light that makes everything look softer around the edges. Noelle had suggested it without thinking, a natural progression from the farmer's market, a place where they could sit and talk without vendors or crowds, or the pressure of making decisions about produce they didn't really need. Killian had said yes immediately, as if he'd been waiting for someone to give him permission to spend an entire day away from spreadsheets and board meetings and the endless machinery of making money. They found a spot under an old oak tree, spreading out the small blanket Killian had somehow procured from his car, along with a bottle of water and what appeared to be emergency granola bars, which made Noelle laugh in a way that seemed to surprise them both. What? He asked, settling beside her on the blanket, careful to maintain a respectful distance that felt both appropriate and torturous. Emergency snacks. You're like a very well-dressed Boy Scout. Is that bad? It's endearing. The word slipped out before she could stop it, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. I mean, I know what you meant. His voice was warm, amused. I like endearing better than intimidating. Are you often intimidating? Always. It's part of the job description. Strike fear into the hearts of competitors. Command respect through strategic terror. Never let them see you sweat. Do you like it? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, watching a family playing frisbee nearby, their laughter carrying across the grass like music. I used to think I did, he said finally. Power is intoxicating. Being feared means being taken seriously. But no one has laughed at my emergency snacks in 15 years. The admission was so simple and so heartbreaking that Noelle felt something crack open in her chest. That sounds lonely. It was. I just didn't realize how lonely until recently. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the world happen around them. Children chased each other across the grass. Couples walked hand in hand along the path. An elderly man fed ducks at the small pond, talking to them as if they were old friends. Can I ask you something? Noelle said. Anything. What were you like before? Before the company, before the suits and the corner office? Who was Killian Rhodes when he was just Killian? He leaned back on his elbows, considering the question. Curious. I used to take things apart to see how they worked. Radios, clocks. My father's calculator once, which didn't go well. What else? I read everything. Science fiction, philosophy, poetry, though I'd never admit that last one publicly. Poetry. Mostly Wallace Stevens. The Snowman was my favorite. Something about seeing winter without the baggage of human emotion, just the reality of bare branches and cold wind. That sounds sad. I thought it was honest, uncompromising, clean. And now I think maybe the human emotion is the most honest part. Noel turned to study his profile as he watched a couple teaching their toddler to walk on the grass nearby. The child kept falling down and getting back up, giggling each time, while her parents cheered her small victories. "When did you stop being curious?" she asked. "When curiosity became a liability. When asking questions meant admitting, I didn't have all the answers. Everyone has questions. Not CEOs, not in board meetings. Not when people's jobs and pensions and futures depend on you knowing exactly what to do every minute of every day. That's impossible. It is. But I got very good at pretending otherwise." A soccer ball rolled toward them, kicked too hard by an overeager teenager. Killian stood and tossed it back with an easy athletic grace that reminded Noel he was still young, still human beneath the corporate armor. "What about you?" he asked, settling back down. "What were you like before you learned to be invisible?" The question hit deeper than she expected. Loud, actually. "I used to sing constantly. In the shower, in the car while I did homework, drove my mother crazy." "When did you stop singing?" "When she told me I was disturbing the neighbors, that good girls didn't draw attention to themselves, that making noise was selfish." "Do you miss it, the singing?" "Every day." "Sing something now." "What?" Noel's eyes widened. "Here? In public? Just for me. Something small." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because..." She struggled to find words for the fear that had lived in her throat for so many years. "Because what if I'm terrible? What if you hear me and realize I was right to stay quiet?" Killian shifted closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "What if you're wonderful? What if you've been hiding something beautiful all these years?" "That's worse." "Why?" "Because then I'll know what I gave up." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Noel saw her own fear reflected in his face. The terror of being seen, really seen, and found lacking. "I'll make you a deal," he said quietly. "You sing something, and I'll tell you the real reason I want to buy Riverside Textiles." "That's not a fair trade." "Isn't it? We're both risking something we've kept hidden." The late afternoon sun slanted through the oak leaves, painting dappled patterns on the blanket between them. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 4 o'clock, and Noel realized this perfect day was slowly drawing to a close. "One verse," she said finally. "Something small." Something small. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let her voice find the melody she'd carried silently for years. A lullaby her grandmother used to sing, soft and sweet, and full of the kind of love that asks for nothing in return. When she finished, the silence stretched between them like a held breath. "Noel." Killian's voice was rough with something that might have been wonder. "That was terrible? Beautiful. So beautiful it hurts." She opened her eyes to find him looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before, awe mixed with something deeper, something that made her stomach flutter and her chest tighten. "Your turn," she whispered. Killian was quiet for so long, she thought he might back out. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I want to buy Riverside Textiles because I'm dying inside my own company. Because I built something successful and efficient and completely soulless, and I don't know how to fix it. Because when I saw their family photos and their employee loyalty and their genuine care for their community, I realized I've never built anything that people love." "And you think you can buy love?" "I think I want to learn from people who've never forgotten how to create it." The admission hung between them, raw and honest and so vulnerable it made Noel's heart ache. "Killian?" "Yes?" "You don't need to buy it. You just need to remember who you were before you learned to be afraid of being human." As the sun began to set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they sat on their blanket under the oak tree and let themselves imagine a world where billionaire CEOs could be curious again, where invisible women could sing, and where two people from different worlds could find something real in the space between their fears. But Monday morning was coming, and with it, the return to a reality that had no place for Sunday afternoon magic. Monday morning has a way of shattering Sunday afternoon dreams with the precision of a hammer meeting glass. Noelle stood outside the Rhodes Financial Building at 7:53 a.m., staring up at the 47 floors of steel and ambition that housed her new reality. The weekend felt like a fever dream. The farmer's market, the park, the way Killian had looked at her when she sang. This morning, in her familiar work clothes with her hair pulled back into its practical bun, she felt like Cinderella after midnight, wondering if the magic had ever been real at all. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt different now. She knew things about the man who owned this building, that he kept emergency granola bars in his car, that he'd once taken apart radios just to understand them, that his voice broke slightly when he talked about loneliness. But as the numbers climbed higher, those intimacies felt increasingly fragile, like soap bubbles that might pop at the first contact with corporate air. Vivian greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Carter." "Mr. Rhodes is already in meetings, but he left instructions for your first assignment." The folder on Noelle's desk was different from the Riverside Textiles file, thicker, more official. The tab read, "Portland Acquisition, Phase 2, in Vivian's precise handwriting. Inside she found plane tickets, her name printed on United Airlines boarding passes for a 2 p.m. flight to Portland. Return Tuesday evening. Hotel reservations at the Riverside Inn, walking distance from the textile company's headquarters. A rental car, a per diem that was more than she usually spent on groceries in a month. A yellow sticky note was attached to the tickets. Sometimes understanding requires proximity. K.R. Noelle sank into her chair, the weight of realization settling over her like cold water. This wasn't about weekend conversations and shared vulnerability. This wasn't about farmers' markets and Sunday afternoon singing. This was about business, about using her ability to read people in service of an acquisition that would probably destroy everything the Riverside family had built. She was being sent to Portland to find their weaknesses. Her office phone rang, Killian's direct line. "Good morning." His voice was different, more formal, carefully controlled. The voice of Monday morning, of board meetings and quarterly projections. "You want me to spy on them?" It wasn't a question. "I want you to understand them the way you understood me. And then what? I come back and tell you exactly how to manipulate them into selling." Silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "It's not that simple, isn't it? Noelle." The way he said her name made her chest tight. "Can we talk? In person? I think we've talked enough. Please." Something in his voice, a note of desperation she'd never heard before, made her pause. "Fine, your office, 5 minutes." She walked down the hallway with her heart pounding, past conference rooms filled with people making decisions that affected thousands of lives. When she reached Killian's office, he was standing by the windows again, but this time he turned immediately when she entered. He looked exhausted. His usually perfect hair was slightly messed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled in a way that suggested he'd slept in his office. "Close the door," he said. "So you can fire me privately? So I can explain." Noelle closed the door but remained standing near it, arms crossed. "Explain what? How you spent Sunday getting me to trust you so you could use me Monday? That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Killian moved to his desk, picked up a different folder, one that looked well worn, as if it had been handled many times. "Do you know what my father's last words to me were?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Business is business." Killian's laugh was bitter. He said it right before he died, lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by all the success he'd built, and absolutely no one who loved him. "Killian, I've spent 15 years following that advice. Building walls, maintaining distance, treating every relationship like a potential liability." He looked up at her, and she saw something broken in his eyes. "Until Sunday." "Sunday was a mistake, was it? Because I haven't slept since Sunday. Because I keep thinking about the way you laughed when I mentioned emergency snacks. Because I've listened to you sing in my head about 100 times, and every time it makes me want to be the kind of man who deserves to hear it again." The honesty in his voice made her take a step back. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Use your feelings to manipulate me into doing something I know is wrong. What if I said you don't have to go?" "What?" Killian set the folder down, moved closer, but stopped just out of reach. "What if I said I'm sending you to Portland not to spy on them, but to tell me if they're worth saving?" "I don't understand." "What if I told you I'm considering not buying them at all, that maybe what I need isn't to acquire someone else's heart, but to grow my own?" Noel stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception and finding only exhaustion and something that looked like hope. "You're serious?" "I'm terrified," he admitted. "I've never walked away from a profitable acquisition because it felt morally wrong. I've never cared about the human cost of business decisions. I've never let a woman I barely know completely rewrite my understanding of what success means. So why now? Because yesterday, sitting in that park, listening to you sing, I remembered what it felt like to want something more than profit margins and market dominance. What did you want? To be worthy of the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Noel felt her carefully constructed defenses wavering. "The tickets," she said weakly. "Go to Portland. Meet the Riverside family. Tell me what you see. But don't look for weaknesses. Look for reasons to leave them alone. And if I find them, then we walk away. Find another acquisition. Build something better from what we already have." "We." The word had slipped out, but Killian's eyes brightened as if she'd offered him exactly what he'd been hoping for. "I'd like there to be a we," he said quietly. "If you're willing to help me figure out what that looks like." Noel looked at this man, this powerful, complicated, vulnerable man who'd somehow become the center of her carefully ordered world, and realized she was standing at the edge of something that would change everything. "This is insane," she whispered, "completely insane. It could destroy both our careers. Probably. I could end up with nothing. You could end up with everything." She looked into his eyes and saw her own fear reflected back at her, mixed with a wild hope that felt like jumping off a cliff and growing wings on the way down. "Portland," she said finally. "Portland. But when I come back, we talk, really talk, about what this means, what we're doing, what happens next." "When you come back," Killian said, moving close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, "everything changes." As Noel left his office with the plane tickets clutched in her hand, she wondered if she was flying toward her future or away from it, and realized, for the first time in her life, she was brave enough to find out. Some moments demand everything: your courage, your heart, your willingness to leap into the unknown and trust that someone will catch you. The Riverside Textiles building looked exactly like the photographs, but standing in front of it Tuesday afternoon, Noel understood that pictures could never capture the soul of a place. The red brick facade was weathered but dignified, the windows clean and bright, and through them she could see people moving with the purposeful energy of meaningful work. She'd spent 24 hours in Portland, and every conversation had confirmed what she'd suspected from the files. This wasn't just a business. It was a legacy, a family, a piece of the community's heart made tangible in looms and fabric, and 3 generations of hands working side by side. Margaret Riverside, the company matriarch, had invited her for coffee Monday evening. At 82, she still came to work every day, not because she had to, but because the building held 60 years of her life's work. Her son David ran day-to-day operations with the kind of quiet competence that came from growing up in every corner of the business, and David's daughter Sarah, fresh out of design school, but already brimming with ideas for sustainable practices and worker cooperatives, represented the future they were all fighting to protect. They weren't naive. They knew Rhodes Financial was circling. They'd received the initial overtures, the carefully worded letters about strategic partnerships and mutual benefits. But when Margaret looked Noel in the eye over coffee and asked, "What would you do if someone wanted to buy your family's story?" Noel had felt something crack open in her chest. Now standing outside the building with her phone in her hand and Killian's number on the screen, she faced the moment that would define everything that came next. She dialed. "How was Portland?" His voice was warm, hopeful, and it made her heart ache. "It was exactly what you think it was. Tell me." Noel closed her eyes, gathering courage for words that would change both their lives. "They have what you want, Killian, but not in a way you can buy." "Explain." "They have love. Real, complicated, messy family love that's been woven into every thread of fabric they've ever made. Margaret Riverside told me she can walk through the factory floor and tell you the story behind every machine, every process, every person who's ever worked there. That's not an asset you can acquire, it's a life you have to live." Silence on the other end. Then, And I think you're trying to buy something you already know how to build." "Noel, I'm resigning." The words came out before she could stop them, but as soon as she said them, she knew they were right. "What?" "I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of a machine that takes beautiful things and turns them into profit margins. I can't work for a company that sees families like the Riversides as obstacles to overcome instead of treasures to protect. Wait, just wait. Killian's voice was urgent now, almost panicked. Don't make any decisions yet. I'm coming to Portland. You're what? I'm already at the airport. My flight lands in 3 hours. Don't do anything until we can talk face to face. Killian, there's nothing to talk about. This is who you are. This is what you do. I was fooling myself thinking Sunday afternoon could change that. You're wrong. Am I? Yes, because Sunday afternoon didn't change me. You did. Every day since I met you crying in a parking garage, you've been showing me a different way to exist in the world. A way that doesn't require taking from other people to feel whole. Noelle felt tears start to form behind her eyes. Then prove it. How? Walk away from Riverside Textiles. Not because I'm asking you to, but because it's the right thing to do. And then what? And then maybe we figure out what it looks like to build something worth loving instead of buying someone else's love story. The line went quiet for so long she thought he might have hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. I've never walked away from anything in my life. I know. I don't know how to do this without you. You do. You just have to remember who you were before you learn to be afraid of being human. Noelle? Yes? I love you. The words hit her like lightning, sudden and electric and impossible to ignore. She gripped the phone tighter, her heart racing. You don't even know me. I know you sing lullabies when you think no one is listening. I know you see the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. I know you cry quietly so you don't disturb anyone, and you buy generic cereal because you think you don't deserve the good stuff. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met and the kindest, and that you make me want to be worthy of the way you look at the world. Killian, I know I'm asking for something I haven't earned. I know I've spent our entire relationship crossing lines and breaking rules, and probably scaring you with how much I want this to work. But I also know that I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you. Noelle closed her eyes, standing on a sidewalk in Portland with tears streaming down her face and her heart breaking open in the best possible way. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of believing this is real, of letting myself want something this big, of finding out that I'm not enough for your world. You're not enough for my world, Killian said, and her heart stopped. You're too much, too real, too honest, too good. My world doesn't deserve you, but maybe I can build a better one that does. Through her tears, Noelle saw a young couple walking hand in hand past the Riverside building, sharing an ice cream cone and laughing about something only they understood. Simple, real. The kind of love that didn't require spreadsheets or strategic analysis or corporate approval. Where are you staying? She asked. The Riverside Inn, room 412. I'll be there when you land. Noelle. Yes? When I get there, when we figure this out, I want to hear you sing again. Okay. And I want to tell you about all the things I've been too afraid to want. Like what? Like Sunday mornings and farmers' markets, and the possibility that maybe love isn't a weakness after all. As Noelle hung up the phone and walked toward her rental car, she realized she was no longer invisible. Not to herself, not to the man flying across the country to prove that some things were worth more than money, and not to the life that was waiting for her on the other side of fear. In 6 hours, everything would change, and for the first time in her life, Noelle Carter was ready for everything. 6 months later, love doesn't fix everything, but it gives you the courage to fix yourself. The small conference room on the 32nd floor of Rhodes Financial buzzed with an energy that was entirely new. Instead of the sterile efficiency that had once defined every meeting in the building, this room hummed with something warmer. Purpose mixed with possibility, profit balanced with humanity. Noelle stood at the front of the room, a PowerPoint presentation behind her that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago. The slide read, Rhodes Community Investment Initiative Quarter 3 Results. Employee satisfaction is up 43% across all departments, she reported to the board members seated around the mahogany table. Turnover is down 60%, and our community partnership program has generated not just goodwill, but actual revenue streams that are projected to increase by 30% next quarter. Board member Davidson leaned forward, still skeptical after months of Killian's radical changes. And the bottom line? Stronger than ever, Killian answered from his seat at the head of the table. It turns out that treating people like humans instead of resources is actually good business. Who would have thought? There were chuckles around the room, an impossible sound in the old Rhodes Financial. Noelle caught Killian's eye and saw the pride there, mixed with something deeper. Love, yes, but also respect. the kind of partnership they'd both been too afraid to imagine, but brave enough to build. After the meeting ended and the board members filed out, discussing lunch plans and weekend golf games like normal people instead of corporate sharks, Noelle began packing up her materials. "How does it feel?" Killian asked, moving to help her with the laptop cord. "Which part?" "Leading the presentation, having Davidson actually smile at your recommendations. Watching a room full of people take you seriously." Noelle paused, considering the question. 6 months ago, she would have been invisible in a room like this. Now she was the architect of programs that were transforming how Rhodes Financial operated, the head of a department that existed because Killian had chosen love over legacy, humanity over profit margins. "It feels like singing," she said finally. "In what way?" "Like finding my voice and discovering it was stronger than I ever imagined." They walked to the elevator together, past cubicles where employees were actually talking to each other, past break rooms where laughter replaced the anxious silence of corporate survival. The changes hadn't happened overnight, and they hadn't been easy. There had been resistance, setbacks, moments when the old way of doing business seemed simpler and safer. But slowly, day by day, Rhodes Financial was becoming something new. Still successful, still profitable, but also something that people could love working for instead of merely enduring. The elevator arrived, and as they stepped inside, Killian pressed the button for the parking garage. "Where are we going?" Noelle asked. "It's Saturday, we have plans." "Do we?" "We do now." The parking garage looked the same as it had that night 6 months ago, when Killian had found her crying over a broken-down car and a life that felt too small. But everything else had changed. His Aston Martin was still there, pristine and expensive, but parked next to it was Noelle's Honda, no longer the symbol of barely getting by, but simply transportation. Good, reliable transportation for a woman who no longer measured her worth by the price tag on her possessions. "I have something for you," Killian said as they reached the cars. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, handing it to her with the kind of nervous energy she'd learned to associate with his most important moments. Inside was a single piece of paper. At the top, in official letterwork, were the words, "Georgetown University, Office of Financial Aid. Your application for readmission has been approved," Killian read over her shoulder. "Full scholarship. You can start in January if you want." Noelle stared at the letter, her hands trembling slightly. "How did you—" "I didn't do anything. Well, except make a few phone calls to connect you with the right people. But the scholarship? That's all you. Your grades, your application essay, your interview. I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it feels like charity. Like you using your connections to—" "Noelle." Killian turned to face her fully. "Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then trust me when I tell you that this has nothing to do with my money or my influence. This is about your brilliance, your potential, your right to have the education you've always deserved." She looked down at the letter again, seeing her name printed in official university letterhead, seeing a future she'd given up hope of ever claiming. "What about work? The Community Initiative program. We'll be here when you graduate. Better than ever, probably, because you'll have new skills, fresh perspectives, official credentials to go with the wisdom you already have. And us?" The question hung between them, vulnerable and necessary. They'd built something beautiful over the past 6 months. But it had been built while working side by side, figuring out problems together, creating a new kind of partnership that blended professional collaboration with personal intimacy. "Us," Killian said, stepping closer, "will figure it out. Weekend dinners while you study. Summer internships that let you put your coursework into practice. Late-night phone calls when you're stressed about exams. Whatever it takes. You make it sound simple. It is simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just logistics." Noelle laughed, the sound echoing through the parking garage that had once been the scene of her lowest moment and was now witness to one of her highest. "When did you become such an optimist?" "When I met a woman who taught me that the best things in life aren't bought, they're built. Day by day, choice by choice, with patience and faith and the courage to keep showing up, even when you're scared." 6 months ago, Noelle had sat in this same garage believing she was invisible, temporary, lucky to be tolerated. Now she stood here as a woman who had found her voice, claimed her worth, and discovered that love wasn't about being chosen by someone else. It was about choosing yourself first, then building something beautiful with someone brave enough to do the same. "There's one more thing," Killian said, pulling out his phone. "I got a call from Margaret Riverside yesterday." "Oh?" "Riverside Textiles is expanding. They want to open a West Coast division focused on sustainable practices and worker cooperatives. They asked if I knew anyone with experience in community-focused business development who might be interested in consulting for them. Are you serious? Completely serious. Turns out that when you don't try to buy someone's legacy, they sometimes invite you to help them grow it. Noelle shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, you were planning to acquire them. 6 months ago, I thought love was weakness and success meant being untouchable. Killian reached for her hands, intertwining their fingers. Now I know that the strongest thing you can do is let someone see who you really are. And the most successful life is one where you build something worth loving. As they stood in the parking garage where their story had begun, surrounded by concrete and fluorescent lights, and the ordinary magic of two people who had found each other against all odds, Noelle realized this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of graduate school and new challenges and dreams that finally felt within reach. The beginning of a relationship built on mutual respect and shared values and the daily choice to show up for each other. The beginning of a company that proved business could be both profitable and humane. The beginning of a life where being seen wasn't terrifying. It was the foundation of everything beautiful. Killian? Yes, I love you too. And as he kissed her in the place where she'd once felt most invisible, Noelle sang softly against his lips, not hiding her voice anymore, but sharing it with someone who had taught her that the most powerful thing you can do is let yourself be heard. Because some stories end with people finding each other, but the best ones end with people finding themselves and discovering that they're brave enough to build a love worth singing about. Have you ever had the courage to choose love, even when it meant leaving your comfort zone? Tell us in the comments, what was the moment when you decided to bet on something real, even though you were afraid? And if you haven't had the courage yet, after this story, what would stop you from trying? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.